We're back. Welcome to the Crime Bowl podcast with Bill and Jill, where it's true crime, no bowl. Shout out to all our listeners. Make sure you like and subscribe. Let's grow this channel. Like and subscribe. Okay, let's solve some crime. Tonight we're diving deep into a case that's, it's left folks in Lake Andes, South Dakota, baffled for decades. The deaths of Arnold Archambeau and Ruby Bruguier.
Yeah.
We've got an article here from the City Towner that lays out the details of this really strange case.
Right.
What makes this one so intriguing is that it starts with, what seems like an ordinary event, a car accident, but then spirals into a mystery with twists and turns you wouldn't believe.
Yeah, it really highlights how a combination of factors, bad weather, poor decisions, and just plain bad luck can lead to a truly tragic outcome.
So set the scene for us. What happened that night back in December of '92?
Well, it all started with a party.
Okay.
Arnold, Ruby, and Ruby's cousin, Tracy Dion, were driving home from a gathering in Lake Andes. Early hours of the morning. Now remember, this is South Dakota in December, so the roads were icy.
Yeah.
And it seems like alcohol was involved. Not a good combination.
Definitely a recipe for trouble.
Exactly. So as they were driving, their car hit a patch of ice, skidded off the road, and flipped over.
Oh, wow.
Thankfully, the accident itself wasn't that serious. The car was mostly intact, and no one sustained any major injuries, but that's where things take a turn for the strange.
Okay, I'm all ears. What happened after the crash?
Well, Arnold and Ruby managed to get out of the overturned car, but for some reason they left Tracy trapped inside.
Oh, no.
Now, we don't know for sure why they did this. Maybe they were disoriented from the accident, or perhaps the alcohol impaired their judgment.
It was freezing out there, wasn't it?
Bitterly cold, and Tracy was stuck in that overturned car in the pitch dark with no way to get out. She waited for hours, but Arnold and Ruby never came back. Can you imagine the fear she must have felt?
Absolutely terrifying. What happened to Tracy?
Thankfully, after several hours, a passerby spotted the wrecked car and called the authorities. They arrived on the scene and were able to free Tracy, but Arnold and Ruby vanished.
So they just disappeared into the night.
Gone without a trace. The authorities launched a massive search effort. We're talking law enforcement, volunteers, helicopters, search dogs, the whole 9 yards. But despite all their efforts, they found absolutely nothing.
Wow.
For 3 long months, there was no sign of Arnold or Ruby.
3 months? That's incredible. Did they ever consider the possibility that maybe they wandered off?
Yeah.
And succumbed to the elements?
Of course, that was one of the initial theories.
Right.
But remember, this was a massive search effort. You'd think they would have found something, even if the bodies were partially covered by snow or ice.
Yeah.
And the dogs, they should have been able to pick up a scent.
You're right. It's almost like they disappeared into thin air.
And that's what makes this case so perplexing.
Yeah.
Because after 3 months of fruitless searching, something even more baffling happened. Their bodies were found.
Wait, they found them? After all that time, where?
Right near the crash site.
Hold on. They were found near the crash site. After 3 months of intense searching. How is that even possible? Didn't they scour that area multiple times?
That's the million-dollar question. It's as if they materialized out of nowhere. Ruby's body was found face down in a ditch, and Arnold's was partially submerged in ice just a short distance away.
So, if they were there all along, how on earth did everyone miss them? Were they buried under a heavy snowfall or something? Wouldn't the search dogs have detected their scent, even under layers of snow?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But that's the puzzle. It's like they weren't there, and then suddenly they were.
Okay, this is officially getting creepy. What did the autopsies reveal? Did they shed any light on this mystery?
Well, Ruby's cause of death was ruled as hypothermia, which isn't surprising given the circumstances.
Right.
However, Arnold's cause of death was inconclusive.
Inconclusive? What does that even mean?
It means they couldn't pinpoint a definitive cause. And here's where it gets even stranger. The medical examiner estimated that Arnold likely died weeks after Ruby, based on the condition of his body. It showed signs of less decomposition.
So he might have survived for weeks out there alone.
It's possible.
But why wouldn't he have sought help? And how could he have survived for that long in those freezing temperatures? This is just raising more questions than answers.
Exactly. It's like we've stumbled into a real-life mystery novel. What stands out to you so far?
Honestly, the whole thing is mind-boggling. But I think what's really getting to me is the fact that they were found so close to the crash site after such an extensive search. It defies logic. What could possibly explain that?
Yeah, it's a real head-scratcher, isn't it? You'd think with all those searchers and the dogs, they would have found them even if they were buried under snow.
Exactly. It's like they were invisible for 3 months and then reappeared. So let's dive into some of the theories surrounding their deaths. We need some explanations because right now I'm feeling more confused than ever.
All right, let's start with the most obvious theory, exposure. Given the freezing temperatures and the fact that they have been drinking, it's entirely possible they wandered off disoriented, got lost, and succumbed to the cold.
That makes sense on the surface, but wouldn't the search teams have found their bodies? Especially with the dogs. What are the limitations of search and rescue methods in such a harsh environment?
That's a great question. While search dogs are incredibly useful, their effectiveness can be hampered by several factors. Deep snow, for instance, can mask scents, and if the bodies were somehow moved or shifted by melting snow or wildlife, that could further confuse the dogs.
So the elements themselves could have played a role in concealing the bodies, even from trained dogs.
Absolutely. And let's not forget the possibility of human error.
Right.
Search areas are vast, and even with the best efforts, it's possible to overlook something.
Okay, so exposure is plausible, but the delayed discovery is still a big question mark. What other theories are out there?
Well, some folks believe that Arnold might have actually survived for a while after the crash. Remember, his body showed less decomposition than Ruby's.
Uh-huh.
This suggests he might have lived for days, maybe even weeks, before succumbing to the elements.
That's a chilling thought. But wouldn't he have tried to find help? Why would he stay out there in those conditions?
That's where it gets really interesting. We have to consider the psychological and physiological effects of hypothermia. Severe cold can impair judgment and lead to irrational behavior. He might have been disoriented, confused, even experiencing hallucinations.
So even if he was capable of seeking help, his mental state might have prevented him from doing so.
Exactly. He might have wandered aimlessly, seeking shelter in places that offered little protection, or perhaps he simply curled up and gave in to the cold. It's a heartbreaking thought, but it's a possibility we can't rule out.
We've talked about exposure and the possibility of Arnold surviving for a while. What about foul play? Is there any indication that someone else might have been involved in their deaths?
There's always that possibility, but there's no concrete evidence to support it.
Oh.
No signs of a struggle, no suspicious injuries, and no indication that the bodies were moved any significant distance.
So the lack of evidence doesn't necessarily rule out foul play, but it makes it less likely.
Precisely. We have to rely on the evidence we have, and right now there's nothing pointing to a crime.
Okay, so we've got exposure, potential survival, and foul play, though that seems less likely. What about those rumors that sometimes swirl around these kinds of cases? Things about a cover-up or other people being involved.
Small towns are often breeding grounds for speculation, especially when a tragedy like this occurs.
Right.
There have been whispers about Tracy, Ruby's cousin, who was found in the car, and whether she might know more than she's letting on.
But she was the one who called for help.
Right.
It seems unlikely she'd be involved if she was the one who alerted the authorities.
Exactly. And there's been talk about a potential cover-up, maybe by the local authorities. But again, these are just rumors with no factual basis. It's important to separate speculation from evidence.
You're right. It's easy to get caught up in the what-ifs and conspiracy theories. But we have to stick to the facts. So where does that leave us? What's the official conclusion in this case?
Officially, the case is closed. The investigators determined that the deaths were likely the result of exposure, a tragic accident brought about by a combination of bad weather, alcohol consumption, and perhaps some poor decisions.
But for the families, I imagine that explanation isn't enough. They must still be grappling with so many unanswered questions.
Absolutely. This case highlights how the search for truth can be just as important as finding the actual truth itself. The need for closure, for understanding, is a powerful human drive. And sometimes, even when a case is officially closed, those questions linger.
It's a reminder that some mysteries may never be fully solved, which can be a difficult thing to accept, especially for those directly affected by the tragedy.
Indeed. And this case, with its strange twists and turns, is a prime example of that. It challenges our assumptions about how investigations work, how nature can obscure the truth, and how sometimes, despite our best efforts, some pieces of the puzzle remain elusive.
So if the official explanation is exposure, why do you think this case continues to fascinate people? What is it about the deaths of Arnold and Ruby that keeps us asking questions all these years later?
I think it's the unanswered questions that keep us hooked. The fact that their bodies weren't found for 3 months despite extensive searches, the strange discrepancy in their times of death,
Yeah.
these details create a sense of unease, a feeling that there's more to the story than meets the eye.
It's like our brains are wired to seek patterns and explanations, and when we're confronted with something that just defies logic, it just makes us want to dig deeper, try and make sense of the chaos.
Absolutely. We want to believe that every puzzle can be solved, that there's a reason for everything, but sometimes the pieces just don't fit neatly, and that's what makes cases like this so intriguing
Yeah.
and perhaps a little bit unsettling.
This case also forces us to confront the power of nature.
Right.
It's a stark reminder that the elements can be unpredictable and unforgiving, especially in a place like South Dakota where winters can be brutal.
Yeah, it really underscores the importance of respecting nature's power and being prepared for the unexpected.
Yeah.
A simple car emergency kit, warm clothing, a charged cell phone, these things can be the difference between life and death in a survival situation.
It's so easy to take for granted our modern comforts and conveniences, but this case serves as a wake-up call, a reminder that we're not always in control.
Right, and it highlights the limitations of our technology and investigative techniques. We have advanced forensics, search and rescue teams, and yet sometimes nature still holds the upper hand.
As we wrap up our deep dive into this chilling case, what are some key takeaways you'd like to leave our listeners with?
First and foremost, I hope this case encourages everyone to be prepared for emergencies, especially when venturing out into harsh conditions. Let this be a reminder to pack that emergency kit, dress warmly, and make sure your phone is charged.
Solid advice. What else?
I think it's crucial to understand that while we strive for answers and closure, some mysteries may remain unsolved. And that's okay.
Right.
It doesn't diminish the tragedy or the impact on the families involved.
It's a reminder that sometimes the search for truth is just as important as the truth itself.
Exactly. And finally, I hope this case prompts us all to reflect on the fragility of life and the power of the natural world. We are but small players on a grand stage, and sometimes we're simply at the mercy of forces beyond our control.
This case might be officially closed, but it will undoubtedly stay with us, prompting us to ponder the delicate balance between human resilience and the unpredictable nature of the world around us. True crime, no bull. Thank you all for listening. Leave a comment. Peace out.